Good morning. So we are back live today. I wonder whether you all have any questions over the last 2 weeks from what we covered over the last week. Last week was a recorded session. We covered how to value equity based on discounted cash flows. Now, discounted cash flows is a concept we studied about 2-3 weeks back. It's interesting to note how equity can be valued based on discounted cash flows. Right now, practically what happens is when interest rates are low, right? Say FD rates, for example, about 6 months ago or 3 months ago, they were around 10%, right, and even higher. But FD rates gradually has been coming down. And we have seen FD rates drop to about 5.5–6% levels. And so with the drastic drop in FD rates, investors find their returns diminishing in returns. So what they have to do is they have to find alternate channels to invest in. A part of the funds that investors have will move from the fixed income returns or instruments into other instruments like equity, for example, right? So there will be money going out from the fixed income market to the equity market. So what happens is share prices, the demand for shares will increase, which increases share prices. Right? So that's practically what happens. But actually in theory also that really happens, isn't it? You all can remember Gordon's dividend discount model and all that. D0, 1 plus G divided by the return minus dividend growth rate. Okay. So whenever interest rates go down, share prices will go up. So that is the basic understanding. Yeah. An interesting link between interest rates and share prices. Right. So if you all have any questions from last week, you can ask. If you don't have questions, we can move on. So you may have noticed that for the last 3 months, or even the last 6 months, central bank has been easing monetary policy, which means interest rates have been dropping. When interest rates drop, equity markets go up. Right. So post-COVID, we saw, well, just before COVID, we saw the stock market falling by about nearly 30%. But post-COVID, with interest rates coming down, we have seen a sharp increase in stock prices. Right. So stocks have been booming. The equity market has been booming as a result. So we have seen prices going up. So that is the link between interest rates and stock market prices, stock equity prices. As interest rates go down, share prices go up. Okay. And also, they say that when interest rates go down, people will move out of all the fixed income instruments like FDs and bonds, and they will invest in equity as well as maybe real estate. So real estate prices also might see an increase. You might see real estate prices going up. Now, interestingly, this is something that happened during the subprime mortgage crisis also. Right? The subprime mortgage crisis, most of you will know that it originated in the US. The origins can be traced way back into the early 2000s when US interest rates were at very low levels, almost zero levels. So when interest rates are at zero levels, banks were getting returns of about 1%, 1.5%, and they were not happy with these returns. So what did they do? They started taking more and more risks. Right? So banks started lending out aggressively. So when lending out aggressively happened, now they will first of all lend to the top tier customers, the customers who are rated AAA and investment grade. Right? So once that is exhausted, they will go into the next layer. Right? Because the investment grade customers will borrow at very low interest rates. Now these returns were not enough, so they want to take more risk. They went to the subprime levels, not the prime levels, but the subprime, the second tier market, right? Which is more risky. Now, subprime customers may not have jobs. They may not have repayment capacity, no assets, no incomes. But still, banks were willing to lend because the returns were more attractive than the prime market. Right? So this started happening, and people started borrowing money. And where did the money go? They started investing in real estate. Right? So real estate market started going up in the US. People started taking loans and investing in property. Because property prices every day kept going up and up. Right? They were not static, they kept going up. So when prices start going up, the confidence in investors will increase that the price is going up, and they will start investing more and more, right, in the same type of asset, real estate. So this continued, and prices started going really high. Right? It was a bubble, no one really noticed. That increased. With that, the inflation in the US started going up, right? Because people were consuming more and more. Now, when inflation starts going up, the Federal Reserve starts getting worried. So what they will do is they will start thinking of increasing interest rates, right? They have a interest rate, their target rate is 2%. So they will target an inflation rate of about 2%. When inflation goes beyond that, they will start taking action. And the action they will do is they will start trying to reduce consumption. How would they reduce consumption? By increasing interest rates, right? So they will try to increase the cost of borrowing, because when people find it difficult to borrow, they will not spend as much, right? So they started increasing interest rates, and when interest rates started going up, those who were going on floating rates started feeling the hit. Right? They were the first to get hit, because when interest rates go up, your floating rate interest rate also goes up. Right? If you're based on a floating rate and you have borrowed on a floating rate, your cost will also go up. Now the subprime guys started feeling this more, and rates kept going up further. So what happened? When rates started going up, these guys continued to feel the pressure of interest rates, high interest rates. And at a certain point, it came to a certain point where they could not service the loan anymore, right? Because they had no repayment capacity. Remember, no repayment capacity, no assets. They were forced to borrow. So that's called predatory lending, also from banks, right? They were very aggressive. They did not inform customers what the consequences might be. They were very aggressive with their loans. They did not assess whether the customer has the capacity to repay. They were lending at a rate. So that's called predatory lending. Right. So now these guys found it difficult to pay or service their debt, and they started defaulting. Right? Not one or two loans, but a series of loans started defaulting. Now, banks started acquiring the property and liquidating the property. Right. So there were lots of properties that were going up for sale. Now, all of a sudden, the market, which was at an all-time high, burst like a bubble. People found it difficult to repay. So that's why banks took over the property and sold and tried to recover the loans. Right? So everyone started defaulting because they found it difficult to repay. And all the banks started selling property. Now, banks got into the real estate market virtually. So property prices all of a sudden started coming down, right? Drastically coming down. Now imagine if you had taken a loan of let's assume $100,000. Right? Your loan was $100,000, and the property was $200,000. Then you always have an incentive to repay. But after a certain time, if the price goes up, you will definitely settle your loan, right? Because your asset is worth more than the loan. But the asset price started going down. Property prices started crashing. And your loan did not go down as much. At a certain point, the value of the asset was less than the loan amount, right? So there was actually no incentive for the customers to settle. Why? If they settle, they will have to pay a higher amount for an asset which is worth less. It's always good for a customer's point of view to default. So what did customers do? The borrowers started defaulting at a rate. Even genuine borrowers now started defaulting, because there was absolutely no purpose in servicing a loan which is where you end up paying more than the asset price. So this continued at rate, and the market burst. The bubble in the US burst. That was called subprime mortgage crisis. Now, banks did not have inflows coming in because customers were not servicing their debt. No inflows, banks got stuck for liquidity. That's when central bank or the Federal Reserve announced quantitative easing. They started buying back bonds from the market. When central bank starts buying back bonds, they pump liquidity into the market. That was called quantitative easing. Right? So the Federal Reserve engaged in quantitative easing to address this issue. Now, during quantitative easing, they supplemented it with interest rate cuts in the US. At the height of the subprime mortgage crisis, US interest rates went to 5-6%, right? So US rates going up to 5-6% is a huge jump. At times may not be sustainable also. So with monetary policy easing as well as quantitative easing, the Federal Reserve was able to address this issue. They brought down interest rates and pumped liquidity into the market. Banks had ample liquidity after that. And as also customers who, based on floating rates, again found the capacity to repay. And so US rates remained low for a while. And after quantitative easing, they did something called Operation Twist. That is where they twisted the yield curve and ended up doing tapering. We'll cover those later. So that's the subprime mortgage crisis in the US, right? All because of the housing market. Now, interestingly, this all began because interest rates were low, right? All began because interest rates were low. When interest rates were low, banks and most entities will start taking more and more risk because they want higher returns. Right? They try to look for higher returns. But in their quest for higher returns, they might end up taking a lot of risk, assuming a lot of risk. Sometimes risk which they cannot tolerate. Beyond a certain point, it is not worth taking the risk. Because at some point, if the bubble bursts, you will have to pay. So that is what happened in the US. Now, usually, you and I might feel that it's good to have low interest rates. Absolutely good. Because everything, the economy starts moving, people start spending and consuming more and more. Right? When people start consuming, there'll be more and more jobs created. Right? Everyone wants to spend. So when the spending increases, there'll be demand for goods and services. To supply to the demand, you will need to create more and more jobs. Right? So more and more jobs get created. The economy starts growing at a rate, and that keeps things moving smoothly when interest rates are low. But now this cannot continue forever and ever. It's always a cycle. Right? At a certain point, when the demand goes up to a certain point, it tapers off, flattens out beyond the capacity. If it's beyond capacity at that point, then things start going down. And so it's a cycle, economic cycles. Remember, we have recession, right? Then recovery, boom, depression. It happens day in, day out. Not every day, but in a cycle, right? Every 4 or 5 years, sometimes every 10 years, you get a cycle. So the current crisis, the COVID pandemic crisis, is perhaps the first to strike after the subprime mortgage crisis. Right? Before that, it was the East Asian economic crisis in 1990s, then the dot-com bubble. Then we had subprime mortgage crisis, and now it is the COVID. Right? So every 10 years almost, you must expect some sort of a crisis. There is no smooth running. As bankers, every 10 years, we should gear ourselves up for a crisis. Every crisis might be a new thing, someone which no one thought about. Right? 6 months, maybe 1 year before it struck, no one would have thought about such a crisis. Okay, so it's important that at certain points, when the returns are good, you realize your profit and take less risk so that if there is a crisis, you're ready for it. Yeah. Okay. So any questions up to now? Right. Something else that happened is Sri Lanka's real rates turned negative. Right. Real rate is it's actually nominal rate is the real rate plus inflation. Right. So nominal rate is equal to the real rate plus inflation. How this equation comes is the actual equation. The actual one is 1 plus nominal rate is equal to 1 plus real rate into 1 plus inflation. Right. So if you remove brackets on this side, 1 plus nominal equals 1 plus inflation plus 1 real rate plus real into inflation. Okay, this cancels off and you end up with nominal rate equals real rate plus inflation. That is because this component is negligible, very small amount, so you can leave it out. This is how you get nominal rate is equal to real rate plus inflation. Right, so nominal rate is the return that you actually get. In the sense, the return that is written, the return that is agreed to be given. Right? Now, for example, on FD, if the bank is quoting a rate of 6% for 1 year, that means the nominal rate the bank is offering is 6%. And so nominal rate is 6%. Real rate is the actual return you get. It's net of inflation. Okay, so if you're getting on a FD a return of 6%, and if the inflation rate is 3%, then your real return is 3%. Right? But if your FD rate is 5% and inflation is 6%, then your real return is negative 1%. Negative. Right? So real returns right now in Sri Lanka are negative because inflation is higher than the nominal interest rate. So it doesn't happen always. By coincidence, it has happened right now. Inflation is higher than the nominal rate. So real returns are negative in Sri Lanka. Which means if you invest in fixed income, you will lose money. Right? It's rather better if you spend it today. If you spend it today, you will actually save the 1%. But if you save it today, if you save money today, you're going to lose 1%. Okay. So if you're wise enough, the best thing to do right now is to consume. Take a loan. If you can get it at low rates, fantastic. Start consuming. Because real returns right now are negative. All right. So any questions up to now? So smart spenders, this is the time to spend. Because real returns are negative. If you have surplus money, sitting on money right now is no point. Always good to spend. Right? It doesn't mean you have to spend all your money, but if there was anything you wanted to buy, purchase, consume, now is the time. Right. Okay, so any questions from last week, the last 2 weeks up to now? If there are no questions, we can move on. Right. By the way, on subprime mortgage crisis, there is a movie. Try to watch this. Fantastic. It's called The Big Short. It's all about the subprime mortgage crisis. You need to watch this. Very important. A fantastic movie. You will understand the intricacies. It's how one trader, it's a true story, based on a true story. It tells you how one trader managed to identify that there is something big that is going to happen. Right? Only thing, he did not know exactly when it is going to happen, but he knew that there's something very wrong in the economy. And as a result, he was able to save lots of money. True story, so watch this, The Big Short. Right, so let's move on to fixed income. Fixed income. Right. So what is fixed income securities? It's an investment that provides a return in the form of a fixed or periodic payment and the eventual return of principal at maturity. Right. Now, for example, if you buy or if you invest in an FD, fixed deposit, a simple example, if you invest in a fixed deposit, which pays you a return of 10%. A 1-year FD which pays 10%. Today you invest in 1-year FD which pays a return of 10%. Right? You will invest, let's say, $100. When this FD matures, you get 10 rupees of interest plus 100. Right? So you get eventually 110. So it pays a fixed return of 10 plus the capital of 100. Right? Now, if the bank promised to pay 10%, they will not pay you 8 or 7. You're guaranteed you will get a return of 10 fixed income. On the other hand, if it was a 2-year FD, like let's say 2-year FD, annual interest of 10%, each year you will get interest of 10. If it's a 2-year FD with annual interest, each year you will get interest of 10. And when the FD matures, you will get your capital. Right? So you get 10 here and 10 there. Likewise, if it was a 3-year FD, of 3rd year you get interest of 10. Each of the years you get interest of 10 plus the maturity amount. Okay, that's how the FDs work now. By any chance, if this was a floating rate, right? Floating rate, let's say T-bill plus, right? T-bill plus 1%. Right? A floating rate FD. Now, after 1 year, you will get T-bill at this point plus 1%. Right? So T-bill, now it's 530 odd. Sorry. Yeah, it's around that, 530 odd. So you get T-bill plus 1%. It's even below 5, no? It's 4.8, I think, 4.86. T-bill rate is 4.86 plus 1% is 5.86. So you get 5.86 plus your capital. Second year, you will get again T-bill plus 1%. Right? And the T matures, you get the face value for the investment amount. So every year, you're guaranteed of getting a return of T-bill plus 1%. Okay. Only thing, the T-bill rate will change from year every year. Every year the T-bill rate will change, but you're guaranteed that you will get T-bill plus 1%, isn't it? Okay, so this is the nature of a fixed income instrument. The return is guaranteed. It can be a fixed rate, maybe 10%, or a floating rate of T-bill plus 1%, but it is still fixed income. Why? Either way, you either get the 10% or T-bill plus 1%. Right? You're guaranteed that you will get one of those. Can be fixed rate or a floating rate. Now, what happens if you invest this money in equity? Then what is the difference? Equity, let's say your time horizon is 2 years, like this. You have, let's say you have an option of investing either in FDs or in equity. Right? FDs, let's say, is 10%. So you can either invest $100 in equity, which is equity, or in fixed income. Now you invest 100 in fixed income or in FD. Right? You are guaranteed of getting the interest plus the face value. But what happens if you invest $100 in equity? Are you guaranteed of getting 10% here? A return of 10, dividends of 10. You get dividends of 10. Here also dividends of 10. You get this. Is there a guarantee or not in equity? You can use chat to answer, or you can use chat to ask any questions that you may have. Very good, Patu. If you invest in equity, you don't get a guaranteed return, right? So your return is not fixed. You don't get a fixed rate of 10%, nor do you get a return of T-bill plus whatever, right? So there is no guarantee that you will get a return of 10 or dividends of 10, right? Now let's say you got 0 dividends both years, no dividends, or let's say the second year you got dividend of 10, right? So is there a guarantee that when you sell this eventually in 2 years, second year if you sell, will you get your 100 back? This 100 will come. Is there a guarantee that you can sell the same share at a price of 100 in 2 years? There is no guarantee. Right? Will it be higher than 100? Will it be 150, maybe 200? Is there a guarantee? Will you be selling it for $200? Yeah, still you won't know. Like you might sell it for 200, you might sell it for 50. You don't know. So your return is fixed or not, it is not fixed. Whereas in fixed income, your return is fixed. Equity, your returns are not fixed. Okay, so that is the difference between investing in fixed income and equity. Right. So let's go back to the presentation. For example, 5% fixed rate government bond where $1,000 is invested pays $50 annually till it matures, and $1,000 at maturity. Right. So what happens is, if this was a bond, not a FD, but a bond, right? Now, the whole of Sri Lanka knows what a bond is. So let's say this was a bond. For simplicity, let's say it was a 2-year bond with a coupon of 10%. Right? Now, earlier it was a 2-year FD, annual interest of 10%. Right? If a 2-year bond with annual coupon of 10%, that means every year, first year and the second year, this bond will pay what is called a coupon, 10% coupon. Coupon of 10%. Every year it will pay 10%, 10 on this face value. This is the face value of the bond. Face value is the value that you get when the bond matures. So when this bond matures in 2 years, you will get the face value of 100. The face value of this bond is 100. When this bond matures, you will get the face value of 100. So this is how a bond works. If it's 10% coupon, face value of 100, every year you get coupons of 10. And when the bond matures, you get the face value of 100. Right? So why do you invest in fixed income securities? It helps to diversify. So what's diversification? We will cover diversification in more detail. But for now, diversification means it's a way of reducing your risk. Right? So rather than investing in one asset, for example, let's say you had 100 million bucks where you want, which you feel investing in, okay, which you want to invest. You want to invest 100 million bucks. So if you are an investor and you want to invest 100 million bucks, where will you put your money? Will you buy the entire 100 million you will use to buy a plot of land? Will you do that as an investor? Will you use the entire 100 million to buy land? You will not. What will you do? Yes, you will spread it out, isn't it? You will invest part of it in land, maybe 10% of it in land, another 10% in maybe a bond. You'll have probably 5% in cash. Maybe you might have 50% invested in equity, another 10% in maybe a debenture, right? 10% in perhaps FDs. So likewise, you will spread out your investment. You will not invest in the same type of asset. You will try and invest in various types of assets rather than investing in one particular asset. Right? Now, why would you do that? Why wouldn't you invest in one single asset? Let's say you buy a 100 million plot of land worth 100 million. You don't do it because you are putting all your eggs in one basket. If you do that, right? You're banking on the probability of this land paying all of your returns, right? So you're depending entirely on the bank, not on anything else. You must do it. As an investor, you should not do that because there is no guarantee that a particular investment will always give returns, right? So don't ever invest in just one type of asset. Invest in several types of assets. Right? So diversification helps reduce volatility in the portfolio. Right? Diversification, volatility means the price fluctuation. If it happens frequent, prices change very fast. It's all very volatile. The markets can be very volatile. Now, for example, if you take the last just pre-COVID and post-COVID, soon as the stock market opened, markets were very volatile, right? So mostly markets were falling, then going up. Markets were extremely volatile. That means there were lots of fluctuations, going up drastically, coming down drastically. Right? So markets were volatile. Now, this volatility can be reduced to a certain extent if you diversify. That means you buy not if you're investing in equity, right? Let's say 25% of your portfolio needs to be invested in equity. So 25% you can invest. Okay, you have the mandate to invest 25 in equity. Okay. Right. So let's say you have a total portfolio size of 100 million. You're investing 25% equity. Another 25% maybe FD. 20% bonds. 5% cash. 25% real estate. Let's say 20%. Maybe 5% gold. So likewise, you can invest in various types of assets. Now, within an asset class, right, an asset class is an asset which has similar features. Assets which have similar features are called asset class. And so let's say equity. So John Keells. This 100 million, 25% is 25 million. You can either invest, do you invest 25, all entire 25 million in one particular share? Let's say you buy entire 25 million John Keells. Will you do that? Will you buy 100% John Keells amongst the equity? No, you will not, right? So within this 25%, maybe you might have 10% John Keells. Right? Maybe another 10% commercial bank. I'm just throwing out names. Maybe 10% in some other shops, right? Maybe Access Engineering, or 10% in H&B, right? So maybe 10% in Hemas. Hotel sectors. In various sectors, you can invest. So likewise, you invest in various types of stocks, not just one. Okay. So that's how you split the 25% amongst various stocks. So you're within an asset class, you're again diversifying. Maybe various sectors, like John Keells, Aitken Spence. Conglomerates. So you have conglomerates in your portfolio, then you have banks, you have construction companies, you have maybe cold stores or car dealers or whatever. So you have consumer companies, FMCG, maybe you might have hospitals, right? Hotels. So you put your money in various types of assets, not just one, but several types. That's called diversifying amongst an asset class. Then in FDs, you can invest in various institutions. So you can have maybe in state banks or in commercial banks, right? Or you might have in perhaps some money in primary dealers, not primary dealers. Maybe repos in primary dealers, okay? Non-banks, NBFIs, the finance companies. So this is one option. You can go institutional. institute-wide. And then you can go tenor-wise. Maybe short-term, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, some for 5 years, likewise. So you're diversifying. You're diversifying across institutions as well as across tenors. Bonds, you can diversify across maybe corporate and government bonds, right? And across tenors. Maybe you can have short-term as well as long-term, 3 months special bills and long-term, 10 years, 15-year bonds. For corporate debt, you can invest in debentures. Then you can have part of your money in cash, maybe in foreign currencies. You can buy maybe Australian dollar, US dollar, sterling, euros, likewise. And amongst these, you can start maybe trading. Then you can invest in real estate. Real estate, you can buy residential properties or commercial property. It may be within Colombo or in the suburbs. Then you can invest in commodities. Maybe gold, platinum. Likewise in commodities also. And so you have a highly diversified portfolio. So 100 billion is being invested in several types of assets. Right? Now, this might look administratively cumbersome. Now, you have to monitor so many types of assets. So 100 billion, if you had invested only in one type of assets, let's say 100 billion in one FD, right? It would have been easy to monitor. But 100 billion split across so many asset classes, it's difficult to monitor, but it also reduces risk. So that's the important thing. It reduces risk. Right. Now, for example, if there is a crash, right, maybe one of these shares fall drastically, but it doesn't really matter because the other 90% of your portfolio might still support you. It might give you gains, whereas you lose out on 1 or 2 shares. So it's important that you diversify. Diversification. Fixed income helps you diversify. It helps reduce volatility in the portfolio. You can diversify by investing in different maturities, different risk exposures. Right? Different risk exposures means you can invest maybe in government bonds or corporate bonds. Right? So within corporate bonds, you can invest in investment grade or non-investment grade. And so there are what we call credit ratings. Given by agencies like Fitch, S&P, and Moody's. Sri Lanka, you also have ICRA. they will give investment grade ratings or non-investment grade ratings. So investment grade means triple B, it will be triple A to triple B minus. So triple A is the highest possible investment grade. Maybe the other way around, triple B minus up to triple A. And triple B minus is the lowest investment grade. Whereas triple A is the highest. Investment grade. Okay. So the higher you go, the less likelihood that you will default. Whereas as you go down, the probability of default will increase. So non-investment grade, the highest possible non-investment grade will be double B plus. From double B plus, you can go downwards. Sri Lanka is at B. After B, you get B minus. We are either B or B minus. Right? As a sovereign, our sovereign rating is either B or B minus. And one or two ratings down will get us to C, triple C plus, which is pretty bad. And so it's a challenge as a nation to make sure that we don't fall into those categories, that we do well, and we get our ratings up. Now, the benefit of going up here and from here to here is that our borrowing cost will reduce significantly. Because as you go down the rating grade, your risk will increase. Right? So lenders will charge a premium to lend you. Now, as you go to towards AAA, the premium will reduce. Right? So effectively, your borrowing cost will also reduce. Then bonds will generate an income through coupons. So there is a lower risk in investing in bonds issued by governments or government guaranteed bonds. That is because government will never default on its own debt. Now, Sri Lankan government, for example, will never default on rupee debt, because if they are short of rupees, they can always print. But if the Sri Lankan government is short of dollars, they can't print dollars. So there is a possibility that the government will default on dollars, but there is absolutely no possibility of the government defaulting on their own currency. Right? That is because they can print their own currency, but they can't print foreign currency. So it's very risky for a government to borrow in foreign currency unless they have the capacity to settle. Then there can be tax advantages. Now, some time back, bond income received from bonds were free of taxes. Right? Then the risks of investing bonds. Treasuries do not have default risk unlike corporate debt, since government have invested with the power to print money. So if you invest in bonds, there is no default of risk of default, no default risk at all. So remember, if you invest in a government bond, the only risk that is eliminated is the risk of default, right? And remember, it has to be a government bond in its own currency. If it is a foreign currency denominated bond, then there is default risk. It's called sovereign risk. However, they are exposed to interest rate risk and liquidity risk. Now, interest rate risk is if you, let's say, for example, if you invest in a 10-year bond at a rate of 7%, and if interest rates go up, then you will lose, right? Because you have invested at a return of 7%, whereas in a couple of days, interest rates go to 10%. Right? So you could have earned a return of 10%, but rather you are now locked in at 7%. So you will lose. The liquidity risk is the risk of not being able to sell an asset. Right? So there are some bonds which don't trade; they are not actively traded. Maybe a piece of land, for example, is not liquid. Right? So liquidity risk is also there. If a government issues securities that are not denominated in its local currency, like a Sri Lanka development bond or a sovereign bond, there is a possibility of default, which is dependent on the sovereign risk of the country. DVP-RVP settlement minimizes settlement risk. Now, settlement risk is the risk that one party settles, right? So let's say there are two people who agree to buy. One person agrees to buy a bond, other one agrees to sell. So if the seller, right, if the buyer gives the money and the seller then disappears, there is settlement. It's called settlement risk. To eliminate that, bonds are settled through DVP-RVP. However, counterparties can still default if they fail to deliver the security or settlement amount. Now, although there is DVP-RVP eliminates settlement risk on the given day, the counterparty can default before that. And if they go bankrupt a couple of days before, it's called default risk. Determinants of market interest rates, right? Real risk-free rate, inflation, default risk premium, liquid risk premium, maturity risk premium. Real risk-free rate we discussed. Real rate, that's a real rate. Inflation, the default risk premium, liquid risk premium, maturity risk premium. Right. So then the government is borrowing, let's say for 10 years. If the cost is 7%, and if you and I go to a bank to borrow, the bank might quote a rate of maybe 10%, right? For the same tenor, 10%. Government is borrowing at 7, you and I might borrow at 10. So this additional 3% reflects each of these risks: default risk premium, liquid risk, and maturity risk. Right? Why do governments issue debt? To meet budget deficits. When the government's revenues are short of less than the expenses, that means they have an expense overrun, the deficit is met through issuing debt, government bonds. They to control money supply. Right? Money supply also can be controlled. If there's too much money circulating, the government can issue bonds and reduce the supply of money. Also to control interest rates. When the money supply is controlled, interest rates automatically get controlled. Right. Now, just to refresh our memories, let's do a small exercise. Let's say there is an investment which pays you returns of 10 over a period of 2 years, right? If your discount rate, can you calculate the percent values of these, net percent values of these investments when interest rates are 8%, 10%, and 12%? Small exercise, right? Shall we quickly calculate? Sorry, let's make it 3 years. So you get cash flows of 10, 10, and at the end, let's say 110. Let's calculate net percent values at these 3 levels: 8, 10, and 12. And discount rates of 8, 10, and 12. All right, very good. Okay, so there is nothing new actually. And so your discount rates are 8, 10, and 12, right? So when the discount rate is 8%, your discounting factor 1 over 1 plus 8% to the power n. It is 1. Point 9259. Point 8573. Point 7938. These are your discounting factors. And the percent values are your cash flows into discounting factor. The 9.259, 8.573, is up by 32. So if you add these up, your net present value comes to 105.15. Then if your discounting factor is 10%. This is 10%. It's 105.15. So let's plug the discount rate against 10% value. When discounting factor is 10%, $82.643. You get 100. And finally, when the discount rate is 12%, sorry, For this calculation, it should have been 10%. And finally, when the discount rate is 12%. So 12%, it is 95.2. Right. I hope all of you got these answers. Okay, so let's come back to this. I will explain why we did this calculation. Okay. Now, primary and secondary markets. What are primary and secondary markets? Any idea? Primary market is when a security or a bond is issued, maybe a debenture or a bond is issued for the first time. It's issued in the primary market. Right now, for example, when the government issues a bond or a bill for the first time, it will be issued in the primary market. Right? So whatever comes to in the primary market is a security which has never been there in the market. It has never been there and it's issued for the first time, very first time. And it is called the primary market. Government securities are initially issued at primary auctions, right? So primary auction means only primary dealers can take part in primary auctions. To be a primary dealer, you need a license. If you don't have the PD license or the primary dealer license, you cannot take part in primary bond auctions, right? So there are registered primary dealers in the market. If you go to central bank site, they will give you the list of primary dealers. Only those primary dealers can participate at treasury bill or bond auctions. Potential investors bid through primary dealers who in turn submit the competitive bids electronically. Remember, it's electronic bidding to central bank. The central bank will accept the lowest bid, right? So central bank is borrowing, they will want to borrow at the lowest possible rate, right? So they will give preference to those who have submitted low bids, whose interest rates are low. And if that is the amount that is submitted at a low bid is not enough, they will go to the next level. Bill auctions are usually held on Wednesdays, right? Whereas bond auctions are held on, the settlement happens on the 1st or the 5th of a month, 15th of a month for bond auctions. Now, after bills or bonds are issued for the first time, they will then subsequently trade. The other thing to remember is when a bill or a bond is issued for the first time, the money is given directly to central bank, right? The issuer gets the money. Likewise, in an IPO or initial public offer, when a company comes and issues shares for the first time, the company gets the money direct, right? But subsequently, when individuals or corporates trade in the secondary market, the company doesn't get a cent, right? So remember, borrowers will get money only at primary markets or an IPO. But when securities are subsequently traded, they trade in the secondary market, which is an over-the-counter market. Secondary markets and primary markets, you all should know the difference. the easiest way to remember is when you get married for the first time, then you're trading in the primary market, right? But if you get married for the second, third, or fourth time, any subsequent time after the first, then you're trading in the secondary market. Right? So that's the difference between primary and secondary markets. Easiest way to remember, right? How do you identify securities? Now, all of us have an NIC number, National Identity Card number. There can't be two identity cards which have the same number. All should have a unique number. Likewise, treasury bills and bonds will also have unique numbers. They can't have same numbers. And that is called an international security identification number. So these securities, internationally, we have only one number. If you go to any country and type this ISIN number, you will get the details of this issue. It's easy to identify. Securities identified using a unique ISIN or International Security Identification Number, ISIN number. Okay, so treasury bills and bonds. Now, bills will say LKA, for example, 36414E097. So LKA means it's Sri Lankan bond. Issued in Sri Lanka. Show is Sri Lanka. A means a treasury bill. If it's B, it would be a treasury bond. 364 means originally it was issued for 364 days, a 1 year treasury bill. 14 is the 2014, the year in which it matures. E is the month. And so remember, when you do treasury bills and bonds, you need to know the alphabet. Right? Alphabet only up to the first 12 letters. You should memorize the first 12 letters. Why? It represents, the first 12 letters represent the first 12 months of the year. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L. Up to L, you should remember. Right? You don't have to memorize anything beyond that. So E means the 5th month of the year, May. 09 gives the maturity date, right? 9th May 2014. 7 is the check digit. So that's treasury bills. Treasury bonds, you have LKB 005, 15G, 159. So LK means the issue is Sri Lanka. B is a bond. 005 means originally it was issued for 5 years, right? So you have 3 digits, means you can issue for up to 999 years technically. But in Sri Lanka, usually the maximum is about the issue is about 30 years. In the US, you have about 99 to 100 year bonds. And G is 15 is the maturity year, 2015 maturity. G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G matures in July. 15 is the 15th of July 2015 maturity bond. 9 is a check digit. And so this is how it works. Security identification. Right, let's do another small exercise. If you see a security, right, I will keep this diagram intact. But if you see a security with this ISIN, LKA 182 20 L 185. What can you say about this bond? How can you identify this one? You all can type. Yeah. So let's type in a few answers just to see whether you understood. Yeah. Issue is Sri Lanka. It's a treasury bill. Very good. LK, Sri Lanka, treasury bill. Okay. Originally issued for 182 days. It matures on the 18th of December. Yeah, maturity date also should come. 18th December 2020 maturity. Right. So Gerald, you're almost there, except the maturity date. Right. This is 18th December 2020 maturity. 182 day treasury bill. This is bill issued by Sri Lankan government. 5th is the check digit. How about this? FAT 10 010 30 A15D. How about this? Yeah, Sri Lankan bond issued for 10 years. Sri Lankan bond, like issue in Sri Lanka, it's a bond. Originally issued for 10 years, maturing 2030, January 15. Very good. All right, excellent. So we can move on. The bond terminology. Issuer is the borrower, the person or the entity that is borrowing. Now in this case, it is LK. Right? So Sri Lankan government is the borrower. Maybe it can be US. Right? In that case, this will be US. So UK, it will be UK. Likewise. That is the issuer. That means the issuer is the borrower. Par value is the value that you get when the bond matures. Or the future value, in other words. Par value. Coupon is a periodic interest payment. Now, in this case, if this was a bond, right, it pays a periodic payment. In this case, it pays 10 first year, 10 the second year. The third year, how I got the 110 is, it's actually $10 plus 100. So this is the face value. This is coupon. Okay. Right, I will repeat. How you get face value is the value that you get when the bond matures. Right now, in this example that we just did, you get when the bond matures, you get 100. That is the face value of the bond or the par value. Right? And the periodic payment, right? If this was a bond, periodically you get a coupon of 10. How it is calculated is you take the face value into coupon rate. You get 10. So this 10 is what you get every year until the bond matures. You get from first year, the second year, and the third year. The third year you get the coupon plus the face value of the bond. coupon. Then the price of this bond, right? It's in this case, it is the net present value. The net present value is the price. The net present value of this bond is the price of the bond. And this bond has a price of 95, which is the net present value. Right? The term to maturity. Term to maturity in this case is 3 years. It's a 3-year bond. So it has a term to maturity of 3 years. Then the yield. Yield is the return that you get on this bond, right? In this case, what it means is if you buy a bond at the price of 95.2 and you get returns of 10 each year, and at the end, if you get your face value of 100, the return, actual return you get in this case is 12%. Right? So you're buying a bond at 95.2, and if you get these returns over the next 3 years, plus the face value at maturity, your actual rate return is 12%. This is your actual return. Or in this case, the 12% yield. So yield is your actual return, how much you get in return. If you want to think of crop yield, that is your actual return, isn't it? So likewise, the actual return from this investment is 12%. Accrued interest. Okay. So accrued interest is based on the coupon rate. Now the coupon rate in this is 10% for a bond, given bond. The coupon rate does not change. It does not change. The coupon rate in this case of 10% doesn't change. At 10% coupon does not change. It is fixed. What changes is the yield. The yield changes, but not the coupon. So the coupon is calculated for this period of 1 year. You get a coupon of 10, right? Now, if you take if you want to buy this bond in 6 months, not 1 year, but in 6 months, what happens is you take the price at this 6 months plus the coupon price. Right? So 6 months, now this coupon of 10 is paid for 1 year. Coupon of 10 is paid for 1 year, which means for 6 months you get a coupon of 5. Right? That is 10 into 6 months over 12. Right? So how we actually calculate is the number of days. It's based on the number of days. So it will be 10 into, well, actually this is half. But if it was, that's if it was semi-annual coupon, right? Now this is annual coupon. This bond is annual coupon. That means every year you get a coupon of 10. Every year coupon of 10. If it was semi-annual coupon by any chance, semi-annual coupon, that means you get a coupon every 6 months. Every 6 months you get a coupon. Here every 1 year. That is called annual coupon. Semi-annual means every 6 months. Quarterly means every 3 months you get a coupon. But what they will mention is the coupon rate, right? So if the coupon rate is 10%, that means for a year you will get a total of 10%. If it's annual coupon, you get every year coupons of 10. If it's semi-annual, that means every 6 months you get coupons. But the total that you get for the year is 10. That means every 6 months you get 5. At 6 monthly intervals, 6 month intervals, you get coupons of 5. So instead of 10, you get 5. Every 6 months you get 5. But if you take total for the year, you have received a total of 10. Likewise, if it's quarterly coupons, you will get every 3 months a coupon of 2.5. So if you add up all the coupons for the year, you will have received a total of 10%. So the coupon rate is 10%. It can be quarterly, semi-annual, annual, likewise. So accrued interest is between two coupon payment periods, right? Between the first year and the second year. How much of coupon interest have you earned? That's called accrued interest. Bonds with options, you have callable bonds, puttable bonds, so we'll get back to those later. And the yield curve. Right? Yield curve also will come back. Issuer is the entity that promises to make the payment. They will agree to pay at specified dates consisting of interest and principal. Right? The amount borrowed at maturity. Now, the borrower will promise to pay certain amounts periodically. Right? They can pay coupon, and at maturity they will pay the face value. Coupon plus the face value. Periodic interest. They will agree to pay at specified dates interest, which is the coupon plus principal, the amount borrowed. Types of issuers can be governments, right, or government-related agencies. Now, for example, the Ceylon Electricity Board might borrow, or a bank, state bank might borrow. Maybe the RDA will borrow. So they are government-related agencies. They can borrow. Municipal governments. It doesn't happen often in Sri Lanka, but in the US, it can happen. Corporations, CPC, maybe this, such corporations can borrow. Supranational governments, right? Now, something like the ECB, the European Central Bank, or the OPEC, they are called supranational. Okay, that's the combination of several entities, of several governments, called supranational. Par value, the amount the issuer agrees to repay the borrower at or by the maturity date. Right? So when this bond matures, how much is agreed to be settled? Or the face, it's also called the face value. Coupon is the interest rate stated on the bond when it is issued, the rate the issuer agrees to pay annually. It's called coupon. Holders used to receive interest by stripping off coupons and redeeming them. Right? So the coupon you will receive annually. You can have zero coupon bonds also. So if your bond is a zero coupon bond, you will not receive any coupons in between. It's a debt that doesn't pay interest, no coupon interest. Traded at a deep discount and redeemed for its full face value at maturity. So remember, zero coupon bonds pay, as the name implies, a coupon of 0%. The only payment comes when the bond matures. There are no payments in between. Coupon bonds are debt obligations with coupons attached. Coupon bonds have periodic coupon payments. Price of a bond is the present value of future cash flows received by the bondholder. Right? That is what we just calculated. The price of a bond. Remember, the price of this bond is the present value of each of the cash flows, discounted at the yield. So price of a bond is the present value of future cash flows received by the bondholder. Cash flows are interest payment at the end of each period plus face value received at maturity. Whatever the face value you receive when the bond matures, plus coupon payments are called contribute to the price of this bond. Cash flows discounted at the should be discounted at the required rate of return. In other words, cash flows at each of the cash flows need to be discounted at the yield. Okay, so each of these cash flows needs to be discounted at the yield, and the price is nothing but the total present value of each of the cash flows, or the net present value of the cash flows gives the price of the bond. All right, so let's try this calculation. Before we try the calculation, let's go back to the example that we just worked on, right? Okay, so now we know that the price of the bond is calculated using discounted cash flows, right? Okay, so using this knowledge, let's do a little bit of analysis. Okay, I'll write it on this side. Now, in this case, coupon. I'll write it here. The discount rate. In other words, it is the yield. And the net present value. So let's also write the coupon. Now let me ask you a simple question. Very simple question, right? What is the coupon rate of this bond? What is the coupon rate of this bond? Simple question. The coupon rate of this bond. So all calculations are based on the coupon rate. What is the coupon rate? Simple question. No, Gerald. It's 8, 10, and 12 are the discount rates or the yields. But the coupon is what? The coupon never changed, no? It is 10%, yes. Coupon rate never changed, it remained at 10%. Right? So coupon never changed, remained at 10%. Only the discount rate or the yield kept changing. The coupon rate was fixed. First instance, coupon is 10%, the yield is 8, right? Yield is less than the coupon. Then it trades at the price is, so sorry, I'll write one more thing, the face value, 100, 100, and 100. Face value never changed, remained at 100, right? This is the price. So let me write the face value here. When the yield is less than the coupon, when the yield is less than the coupon, the price of this bond is more than the face value. Price is more than face value. But when the yield is equal to coupon, price is equal to face value. And when the yield is more than the coupon, price is less than face value. Okay. So if the price is more than the face value, this bond is called a discount bond. This bond is trading at a discount. And if the price is equal to face value, it is trading at par. Hold on. What am I saying? What am I saying? It's a premium bond. If the price is more than the face value, that means you have to pay more than what you actually get at maturity. And the face value is less than the price. The price is more than the face value. It's called a premium bond. You're buying it at a premium. Price is equal to face value, it's called par. Price is less than the face value, it is called a discount bond. You're buying it at a small discount. Right? So it's all based on the difference between yield and the coupon. If the yield is more than the coupon, it's at a discount. If the yield is less than the coupon, it is at a premium. Yield is equal to the coupon, trading at par. So this relationship you need to remember. That is the whole idea. You need to remember these relationships. Okay. Right. So let's try these calculations. Let's try the calculations. Again, the calculations. Right. The first one, a bond that matures in 6 years has a par value of $1,000. Annual coupon payment of 80 and market interest rate of 9%. What is the price of this bond? It matures in 6 years. For convenience, shall we reduce it to 3 years instead of 6? Okay, let's do 6 years, it doesn't matter. This is the year. Cash flows are the annual coupon payments. Right. And has a par value of 1,000. That means when the bond matures, you get 1,000. Right. So at maturity, you get 80 plus 1,000, 1,080. When the bond matures, you get the par value plus coupon. So you get 80 plus the probability of 1000, 1080. The yield is 9%. Yeah. Very good. So you should get 955.17, right? So it's a simple net present value calculation. There's nothing new in bonds. If you understood net present value, then you're through. Okay. Right. Now, what is the coupon of this bond? Bond coupon. Coupon of this bond that you just calculate. What is the coupon? %. Yeah, the coupon rate, right? Now, what is the face value of this bond or the par value? Is 1,000. And the coupon you receive is 80. So the coupon rate is 8%. Now it is 8% coupon bond. Coupon is 8% yield, 9%. 9% yield, 8% coupon. Yield is 9%, coupon is 8%. Should it trade at a premium or at a discount? It should trade at a discount. Right? Because yield is more than the coupon, this bond should trade at a discount, which means the price of the bond should be less than the face value. Face value is 1,000, price is 955. So yes, this bond is trading at a discount. That's our calculation. It's a reality check. Now, after you do your calculation, you can check based on coupon and yield whether you have arrived at a possible answer. Now, you might make mistakes and still come at a discount, but if you by any chance end up with a premium, that means you're wrong. Okay, so that's a way of checking whether what you have done is correct. Next one. The bond has 15-year maturity, 10% annual coupon, and $1,000 par value. 15-year maturity, long-term bond, 10% annual coupon. Coupon is 8, $1,000 par value. Face value is 1,000. Required rate of return is 10%. 10% annual coupon. Given with risk, maturity, liquidity, and other rates in the economy, what is the fair value of the bond? Right. So let's calculate what is the price of this bond. $15-year bond. 10% coupon. So every year you get 100. Discounting factor. At 10%. Right. So shall we calculate the price of this bond? Then you need to calculate the present values. And calculate price finally. Okay, so how much do you get? What is the price of this bond? It's a lengthy calculation. 15 years of cash flows, 15 years of discounting factors, 15% value calculations, and then finally you need to total them up. Right? So how much do you end up with? Well, actually, there's a shortcut, right? Straight away, the answer you don't, without any calculations, you can say the answer is $1,000. Why? How can you say that the answer is $1,000? Now let's go back to the question. Says a bond has a 15-year maturity, 10% annual coupon of 10, par value 1,000, required rate of return is 10, or the yield is 10%, right? So coupon is what? 10%. Yield is also 10%, which means the coupon is equal to the yield. So when the coupon is equal to the yield, using the knowledge that you already learned, what is your conclusion about price and the face value? Remember the relationship we did earlier, about half an hour back? If the yield is more than the coupon, the bond is trading at a discount. If the yield is less than the coupon, bond is trading at a premium. But if the yield is equal to the price, equal to the coupon, then the bond is trading at par. If the bond is trading at par, then the price is equal to the par value or the face value. Okay, so in this case, without any calculation, you can straight away say the price of this bond is equal to the face value. Therefore, the price is equal to $1,000. Right? So that's the shortcut. The exam, it's very important that you use shortcuts. You have to use your knowledge. Otherwise, you will spend a lot of time trying to calculate this, and you will waste a lot of time which could have been used efficiently. Now, this question can be for 5 marks. right? 5 marks at the exam means about 8 to 10 minutes. Okay, so if you calculate this, it will take you more than 10 minutes easily to calculate. With all these calculations, 15 calculations, it will easily take you more than 10 minutes, and you might get the answer also wrong. Right? Because there are so many calculations to be done. Now, the easiest thing to do is if you had remembered the relationship between coupon and yield, you can have easily arrive at the price. Right? Coupon is equal to the yield in this case, therefore the price is equal to the face value or the par value. It's equal to $1,000. Right? You don't have to do any calculation. Straight away you can tell. So use shortcuts, but make sure the shortcut takes you to the right place. If you go to the wrong place, then also you're in trouble. Now this is the bond price formula. You can use this formula to calculate bond prices. If you look at it, first one is the coupon divided by the frequency into this factor. Now this factor is, if you go to the annuity factor, you will notice that it is similar. Right? So this is the annuity factor. Because the periodic coupon you receive is like an annuity, isn't it? So it's discounting an annuity. And the final one is the face value discounted at the coupon rate, at the yield. Right? So that's also the coupon plus the present value of coupons plus the present value of the face value. Therefore, the price of a bond is the present value of coupons plus present value of face value. That is what is given by this formula. Right. So what we'll do is we'll stop here for now. And next week also we are meeting through a recorded session. Right. If you have questions based on what we are going to cover next week, you can always ask the week after. So you will do a recorded session for the next week. Right. So thank you very much. I will see you next week through a recorded session and the week after through a live session. Thank you. All the best. Stay safe.